there, Mama. I'm Courtney Cecil, proud mom of two boys and an organizational culture and behavior change executive. And I'm a believer in building a movement to help the burned out, overwhelmed working moms reclaim their control and free time so that they can confidently remain in the workforce without losing their sanity or themselves. Now, let's get started. Hey, y'all, I'm your host, Courtney Cecil, and welcome back to another episode of the Life Management System. So, inside this episode, I'm excited to host Jenna Rogers. So, Jenna is the founder and CEO of an organization called Civility. So, you can appreciate just even by the name on why it makes absolute sense for her to be with us today. So, Jenna and I share one really core belief in common, and that's that healthy workplaces are possible. And we are committed to helping women be at their best and both contributing to the workplace, but also to themselves. So Jenna's passion specifically lies around investing in helping reshape the way that we communicate, both as individuals and contributors to the workplace. So career civility, for anybody that's interested, I'm assuming, Jenna, you can correct me on this as soon as I finish, will work with you nationally, but Career Civility is a Chicago-based communications consulting firm. So shout out to those of y'all in the Midwest. And she directly supports both young professionals and corporate teams and small business owners and working moms on strengthening communication, reducing burnout, and fostering healthier and more collaborative work environments. So I think y'all are getting to pick up on the theme of why I have Jenna here with me. But in short, just like me, she is a culture builder. She is committed to creating spaces that foster empathy and honest communications where people can feel heard, respected, and empowered. So Jenna, welcome to the Life Management System.
What an introduction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's so strange hearing your bio read back to you, isn't it? It's like an uncomfortable position where you're like, gosh, I'm torn between thinking, damn, I'm a badass, and wow, this feels a little icky.
I think you did it better than I could have. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, real quick, before we forget to go back to that, your services, I'm assuming you do work nationally, even though you are a Chicago-based firm, correct?
I do. Even though it is stressful on the family system to travel for work, I actually really enjoy traveling for work as long as it's not too much. So I always like traveling at least once every other month to meet people, to get in front of teams, whether I'm speaking at individual leadership offsites or conferences or association conferences. I do enjoy traveling for work.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I struggled because I was used to being on the road about once a month, and it felt very healthy. To your point, particularly as a mom to little kids, which you are, Jenna's kids are 2 and 4. Something about having a room to yourself for even just one night to be able to breathe and go to sleep when you want to and catch up on work and actually feel in control is very liberating. So I remember struggling massively when the pandemic hit because I went from having reliable 1 to 2 nights by myself to I have 2 kids and our au pair was here and my husband was here. It's like, okay, wow, this is 5 people all the time is just feeling like a lot when you're used to that travel.
It was a lot. I really enjoy traveling for work because, growing up, we did one vacation every year and it was to the same place every year, right? So, when I started traveling for work, I went to New York City for the first time. I went to Dallas for the first time, Austin for the first time, Miami to the first time. I had never been to Florida. Growing up in Arizona, like I didn't really explore the East Coast. It was either like Colorado, California, or Mexico. So traveling for work has afforded me so many opportunities and I will never take that for granted.
Yeah, it's actually what made me addicted to travel, I think, Jenna, because I mean, I've always kind of loved travel, but similar to you, I grew up going to Pawleys Island, South Carolina for a beach trip, and then to Florida to see my grandparents and stay at their place. And it was
Yeah.
those two on repeat every single year. So when I finally got to do it on my own, I became addicted. But much of that happened through work. When I was pregnant with my first, I think I went to like 20 different US cities that I would have, I mean, why would I ever have a reason to go to St. Louis or to Kansas City or, these places that or delightful to visit. I got to meet a lot of great new people. Detroit, that's another one. I mean, places that you're probably not going to visit unless there's a
Yeah.
reason to pull you there. And I was grateful for the opportunity.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so Jenna, most of the people listening, not all of them, but most of them are working moms specifically, and they are tuning in because they are already feeling maxed out. They have a very full schedule, they have a lot on their plate, a lot of balls in the air, and they're just feeling full, extra full. So, as a communication expert, what is one communication habit that you believe we tend to waste time and energy on that these moms might be able to drop today?
In solidarity. I have so much empathy and compassion for the situation. And you know what they say, those who can't do, teach, which is, why I get paid to teach on communication, because I can't necessarily do it myself. I think a lot of times us as women, especially working moms, we're constantly over explaining ourselves, right? We're either constantly over explaining ourselves or we are under asking for help. So I would recommend like kind of trying to balance the energy of spend more time asking for help, whether that's from your partner, whether that's from family, whether that's from friends, and less time justifying the decisions that you are making. There's a delicate balance in your professional life to be transparent and explain, here's the problem, here's the solution, here are the results, right? Like that great energy to expend on explaining. But when you are justifying, I need to take this day off because then I need to do this, but then I'm going to make up the work here, you're adding chaos to the equation. Just make the decision, move on, and then spend time asking for help. So if you need to take time off, how are you delegating that meeting? Or how are you delegating the work? How are you canceling the meeting? That's where you should spend your time and energy on asking for help versus over explaining.
The listeners that have been tuning in for a while are no strangers to delegation. It is one of my biggest pain points of passion, where I feel it is absolutely critical to us being able to keep our head above water. But what I love about what you just said, Jenna, is it's so practical in ways that we inadvertently find ourselves in those habits. Women in particular feel like we need to justify what we do at any point in time. And we feel like we need to do that to protect our brand. And I think as a communications expert, that is one thing that you are helping women preserve is their brand. And when you peel back those layers, what I'm hearing you say is like, boss up. Because what happens when we over explain or over justify is even though we do it to help protect our brand, in some ways we are unintentionally diminishing the authority that we really need to own to command a room and to command people's perception of us. And it's funny how that juxtaposition of like we do it because we're trying to protect our brand, but unfortunately, we're also probably tarnishing it, even though that's never our intent.
It's a balance and it's an art too. And I think the more you practice it, right, you almost have to overshare to learn, okay, that was too much. You also have to be a little
Mm.
bit too reserved to realize, okay, maybe that held me back from having a healthy relationship with this individual. So I do think it's trial and error. It's a balance because on one hand, maybe you don't need to explain to everyone that your kid was homesick, that you just need to move the meeting today, right? But then on the other hand, maybe there is a relationship where you can share that information. So it's a balance, it's a delicate dance. But the more that you stumble, fall, and trip in mud, the more that you're going to learn from it and figure out how to really cultivate and be more confident in the brand that you're creating and communicating.
Yeah. Okay. And I appreciate those tangible examples too to help bring that to life. Okay. So let's talk about probably the biggest communication time suck that exists, and that's our inboxes. Like, for anybody that sits in corporate, I'm willing to bet that more than anything, it is your inbox that is commanding your time and often more than we realize. So, what do you believe are some of those bigger email time wasters, and what might people should be considering doing instead?
How much time do you have? So, email communication, this is something, and actually, I start off almost all my talks by saying communication is the number one skill, and yet no one actually knows what good communication looks like, right? We're learning through osmosis, and that is average at best. Now we have all these different channels of communication, email being the primary channel of communication. 73% of business is done via email. So to overlook email communication as a skill is a detriment to how you're communicating with your kids' school, same way as how you're communicating professionally, right? So when it comes to email communication, email management is number one, right? We get sucked into the tedious, manial, easy to respond to emails, and we don't spend time on the strategic ones that will actually move the needle forward, move a project forward, and ultimately contribute to our success. So I recommend doing an audit. I call it the revenue generating method, where you are auditing your inbox, whether you are team 2,000 unread emails or team 0 unread emails. This can benefit everyone. What are the emails that will move the needle? What are the emails that are going to get you paid on Friday or your next pay cycle? Highlight those emails, drag them to a to-do list, add them to a folder. What are the emails that you need to get to, but probably not today? Add those to your calendar to do them when you have like a free block or 2-hour block on your calendar. And then the rest, archive or delegate them. Who else can do them? Can you delete them or archive them? They don't need your attention. And oh, by the way, if you accidentally delete or archive an email that you need to do, they'll follow up with you. Don't worry. How many follow-up emails are we sending? And then focus on those revenue generating emails. Those are the ones that you should be getting done today by close of business or tomorrow at the latest. So the revenue generating model for inbox management. And then in your, easy day-to-day email communication, stop writing, "I hope this email finds you well." It is a waste of space. No
It's
emails.
cringe too. It's so cringe.
Exactly. You see the memes for a reason. Delete that from your email vocabulary. "I hope this email finds you well." Delete it. "Just wanted to check in." Just following up. Those are unproductive ways to start emails. Get into it. The goal of this email is reference something from your past conversation. You don't need to make emails. Again, this goes back to us over explaining, over communicating. We tend to do that a lot in emails, right? So get to the point, take out the fluff. And then I always like to end my emails with an intentional closer versus just thanks. Something like, "Thanks for your time. Hope this helps. Appreciate, your attention to this," whatever it may be, or "appreciate your time on this." So those would be my quick email tips, really fast, summed up.
So I feel really good about myself, Jenna, after hearing this, because I feel like I am excelling at the inbox thing and it makes me really proud. So I'm going to pat myself on my back. But I also want to double click on something that you said around essentially applying the revenue generating mindset to your inbox. That is critical. And I'm experiencing that fully as a business owner now. If I am not doing revenue generating activities, I am not making money. Ergo, my family is not eating. That's a problem. But as critical as a skill set that is to me, it is also the biggest time waster for most of us. So I have a free guide. I'll drop this in the show notes for anybody that doesn't have it. It is how to productively manage your to-do list. But what I talk about there is essentially differentiating the difference between a to-do, which is something that has to get done, versus a wish list item, which is the stuff that you ultimately would love to do, but it's nice to have stuff. It's not something that you are being measured by. It is not something that your boss is asking you to do or that is actually productively driving to any core outcome. So I love, 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 love that you called attention to that. Okay, so let's double click on this and pull it a little bit further. Overthinking is a massive time waster, just like inbox can be if you are not productively using it. Overthinking tends to be one of the things that women waste most of their time on. So for somebody that struggles with overthinking, they either lack clarity or lack confidence to be able to make a declarative decision and move on. What is one of your favorite mindset or language shifts that might help them feel a little bit more grounded in their thinking or feel a little bit more confident in making that decision and moving forward?
Well, again, so much solidarity because, hi, I'm an overthinker. When you are up in the middle of the night with your child, rocking them to sleep, like I was 3 times last night with my son, that's just like when all the thoughts surface and come to life, and you're like, "I got to do this. I should have done that. Why didn't I do this?" I might have a little bit of an unconventional take here, a hot take here, but like, make the decision and that's it. You'll learn from it, right? Whether it was the right decision or not, you make a decision. I think you give yourself a timeline to make that decision in. So by the end of the day, by the end of the week, you make that decision, you stick with it, and you learn from it. I had someone in an interview one time ask me, would you rather, or do you hate to lose, or do you love to win? And I didn't really know how to answer the question because I was like, well, I actually don't hate to lose, because every time I lose, I learn something from it. And same thing with overthinking, same thing with making that decision. You are going to learn something, whether it's a tough lesson or whether it's a lesson that you're like, heck yeah, that was a win. And you learn from it. You're going to learn from it either way. So make the decision, know that you are going in with like a growth mindset or a learning mindset. And I think it'll take some of the sting out of the overthinking.
Amen. I always say that action brings clarity. And most of the decisions that we stew on as well are immaterial. And that's the ironic thing. I will sit across from somebody at a restaurant who will spend 20 minutes making the perfect decision on a $10 meal. Like worst case scenario, if it's not the right one, order another one and you get to take leftovers home to your spouse. Like, or, there are bigger problems here, but that action really does bring clarity. I'm a believer in that. I love your answer. Okay, so moving on then, Jenna, you're a mom to two, and you probably do a lot of negotiating with your tiny tyrants.
Yeah,
And she's nodding her head for
sure.
anybody that is not watching this online. Okay, so let's put on our mom hat for a second. We talked a little bit about work, which though what it is that I think we talked about applies just as much at home, but let's fully talk about home right now. What can moms do as it relates to giving feedback to their kids, or worse and harder sometimes, giving feedback to our co-parents on how they perhaps could be more effective in ways that are not necessarily going to put them on the defensive? Because I mean, there are opportunities for all of us to continue to elevate how we show up and to be at our best. Sometimes we know them and ignore them, and sometimes they're true blind spots. So, as it relates to providing feedback, how would you recommend a mom kind of tiptoe around that by being direct and helping elevate their family, but without actually offending or putting somebody on the defensive?
I don't know. My answer will probably change in like a year when my daughter's, a year older, my son's a year older, because I think that like we're constantly gathering data around their personalities, right? Like you think you know them just because they're your child, and then they just constantly change and evolve over time. And what worked for one doesn't work for the other. So I say this very lightly because it could change in a year just based on the data that I'm gathering from my children. But I think what's working well for my 4-year-old right now is being curious and listening. So asking her questions and just giving it space for the answer. I think that I do it in little ways of like, what made you smile today, or what made you, sad, right? And just kind of like hearing what she says. Sometimes they're really, frivolous things. And then sometimes it's actually like, oh, that was a learning moment for me. And not necessarily using that as an opportunity to give her feedback, whether it presents it in the moment or down the line, or maybe me understanding how to set boundaries. But I think that bleeds into my answer for my 2-year-old is like, you stick to those boundaries and you don't waver, because the minute that you do, they are going to infiltrate full force. Same thing at work, right? You have your boundary, and then that one time you take on that last minute project, and now you are the person that gets projects added to you. Same thing with kids, right? Like you give them, listen, we give them a treat on a Friday night because we're like, yeah, it's the weekend, and they want a treat every single night, right? So just like holding those boundaries, and then asking, just like figuring out what questions to ask my kids and how to listen.
I love, and I want to get back to the whole curiosity listening point here in a second, because it does relate very heavily to work. So I don't want to gloss over that, but I love that you started there, because I think that inherently opens the conversation as opposed to putting somebody on the defensive. So as an example, just yesterday, ironic to this conversation, my oldest, his name's Witten, he's 10 years old, and he is a huge football fanatic. And as a family, we are playing, I should say, fantasy football for the first time. And there's a lot of emotion tied up in that for somebody like him that is that passionate about football. And while as a Charlotte local, we do choose the Panthers first, I grew up a Steelers fan. I will always be a Steelers fan. And that was Witten's first exposure to football, was me taking him to a Steelers game. He went to a Steelers game before he went to a Panthers game. So just all that to set the stage, to fast forward to yesterday, where he went to make a change on his fantasy team only to see that I had picked up a Steelers which is his defense that he had previously dropped. Now, I did not know that my husband had made a firm handshake with him that nobody would pick up the Steelers if he dropped them for the week. So I picked
Mm.
them up. I used them, by the way, they rocked. So I got to take advantage of them being on the bench. But my son was absolutely pissed at me because he thought that I took this away from him and he had a clear handshake on nobody's going to take the Steelers if I put them on the bench for the week because they had a bye. So I had a conversation with him last night about that very thing, Jenna, about, hey, what happens if you approach the conversation from a place of curiosity?
Mm.
Because if you did that instead of automatically getting mad at me and not wanting to talk to me about it, you would have learned that I actually didn't know that that was a conversation you and your dad had. So you went from us having one of the best weekends of your life. I took him because it's his 10th birthday. I flew him from Charlotte to California to take him to Harry Potter at Universal Studios Hollywood. We went to a football game out there. USC played Michigan. We had the biggest time.
Yeah.
And then this is the very next day. So we went from being at our high to being our ultimate low because he did not get curious and he did not assume positive intent. He
Mhm.
just assumed that I was taking advantage of him and doing what I wanted instead of getting curious that I actually had no idea. So, albeit those are executive functioning skills that we learn as we age, but sometimes it's not easy. Even in the workforce, it's hard. It's sometimes hard to take a step back and remove ourselves from the situation and say, hold on, let me call it timeout. Let me actually see whether this really jerk thing this person did was actually a jerk thing or whether they didn't know any better. So, are there any other communication habits that we use at work, Jenna,
Mhm.
that might help us at home or hurt us at home and vice versa? Are there things that we do for the good or bad at home that might hurt us or help us at work?
For sure. That story is very relatable from a younger child's perspective that I'm actually actively learning right now. My first instinct when I tell them, 12 times to stop horsing around on the couch or, jumping off the couch because they're going to get hurt. And then all of a sudden they get hurt. And then it's just like this big screaming, oh my goodness. And then I'm having to, help them, when I just told them, hey, stop playing on the couch, right? Like my first instinct is to be like, I told you to stop horsing around on the couch, right?
Yeah.
When instead, they're not going to hear that, right? I have to say that was scary, right? Or that really hurt, or what happened, right? To your point, leading with curiosity, being compassionate and empathizing. What's interesting, it's really hard for me to do as a mom. At work, it's not as hard for me to do. When someone makes a mistake, when someone messes up, it's like, all right, that's a problem. Let's, work through it, right? So I think that it's almost like applying some of that work mentality to the home life of not just going right into mom mode of like, I told you to stop doing that, of taking a breath and be like, okay, we're going to fix it. Like that was a problem. We're going to fix it. How are we going to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Right. Because that's what we would do at work instead of at home. So that's number one of just like maybe applying some of the skills that you use at work in terms of like de escalating, being patient, being curious. Um, but then what I've learned at home and I apply at work is repetition. I have to tell my kids every day, multiple times a day, stop playing on the couch, stop, pulling your brother off the couch, stop jumping on him, like stop doing that. Same thing at work. Here's, you have to repeat yourself at work multiple times. At work, I think it's not necessarily in like the no, stop doing this, don't do that. I think it's more so just in like the process and reaffirming like this is the process, this is how we do things, so that we are educating, but it all comes down to like repetition. So I think de-escalation, curiosity, and repetition are three skills that are super important both at home and at work.
Those are really solid examples. Really solid examples. A couple things come to mind for me, particularly when you talked the very first example, Jenna, about saying that we tend to be less gracious at home when we get feedback. We tend to snap more. And I'm kind of wondering out loud here a little bit, but part of it's probably because our patience is tested a lot. Because to your point, you have to repeat the same things over and over and over. But I also can't help but wonder how much of it is generational because our generation grew up at a time where there was a little bit more heavy fisting to the way
Hmm.
that we delivered feedback and the way that we set expectations. Whereas our generation tends to be more compassionate
Hmm.
and but that's not what was modeled for us. So
Hmm.
it part of it does make me wonder how much that might have something to do with it. I mean, I remember multiple people saying there was a lot of screaming in my house. And that screaming was because that's how we were commanded. That's how the expectations were set with us. So it's what was modeled for us. So
Hmm.
knowing that you focus a lot on psychological safety at work and knowing that we as moms tend to be the CEOs of our house. I've got a couple questions. Like question number one with this is how might we be able to disrupt that and actually start building and preserving some of that psychological safety at home to where we don't snap, we don't, and that we do create a space where just like the example I talked about with the fantasy football, or my son will come to me and feel comfortable having the conversation instead of just shutting me out because he assumed positive intent or he did not assume positive intent. So like how might we build and preserve that psychological safety and how might our poor communication actually erode some of it and how might we course correct it if we find that being pervasive?
Good question, loaded question. I feel like this will be something that my kids will listen to when they're adults and be like, "You said all the right things and you did all opposite." So again, grain of
I think
salt.
about that all the time too.
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. That said, intergenerational communication is the most popular workshop that I've done in 2025. So this is something near and dear to my heart. It's something that everyone is willing to have a conversation around because from a workplace perspective, uh, what got us to where we are will not get us to where we want to go, right? How the boomers grew up in the workplace, how Gen X grew up in the workplace is not how Gen Z is going to grow up in the workplace. It is vastly different. And so for us to take example from older generations may not necessarily work, right? So there is this, and I think that applies to the household as well. Our kids are growing up in a quick, like the world is so quick, the world is so connected. There are so many advantages and disadvantages. So how our parents parented is not feasible for how we parent today. So there's a lot of unlearning, there's a lot of learning. And I think that's where, from a communication perspective, like awareness around it, I think is the first step. Like that's what I always say in these workshops, right? Like the first step to creating more psychologically safe organizations and to improving cultures is just being aware of these differences, of these challenges, right? So bringing awareness to it, then bringing a little bit of education to it, right? That's where like I'd lean more so, like my expertise is more so in like the corporate world versus like the parenting world, because I am just a freshman with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. But then also having conversation about it, right? Having conversation with coworkers, with industry peers, with your manager, right? Like with leadership, or if you're in a leadership position, having conversation about it with your partner, with your kids, so that way you can see where your blind spots are, right? Like we don't know what we don't know, and you have to create the culture of awareness, of learning, and then I think of conversation.
I love that. Okay, so if you were if you were a fly on the wall and you were observing a room where people think that there is a communication issue, but it's actually something else entirely. Like, how might that be manifesting in real time? Like, what would you actually be observing that the breakdown tends to be? That's a clunky question, but are you tracking?
Yes, I am picking
Okay.
up what you're putting down. And that's where, when it comes to communication issues, there's almost a spectrum, right? I think a lot of times it's a feeling. Why am I not clicking with that person? Like, why is this person not looking at me in meetings? Why is this person sending me short emails? Why is this person, CCing someone on all these emails, right? There's this feeling of just like a disconnect. Then on the other side of the spectrum, there's literally loss of revenue, right? And you're having to go through layoffs, or you're not performing quarter over quarter, so you're missing your attainment, whatever it may be. There's like this spectrum where it starts with a feeling, like a gut feeling, and then it actually results in business impact. So I always tell this story of one, I worked at this tech company. I was in sales, account management, and from a sales perspective, your team has a revenue number. So or the entire org has a revenue number, and then you're split up into teams, then you have your individual quota. It was Q3. That was like our busiest quarter. We were not hitting our quota. And you could just tell that something wasn't working. So our manager got us into a conference room and was like, we used to be the highest performing team. What is the disconnect? What's going on here? She wanted to open up a conversation about it. And as I sat there, I was also coincidentally going through my master's program at the time, master's in communication with a focus on change management. I was able to look through I was able to look at the conversation through a different lens. And it seemed like everyone had different goals. So I finally just asked the question, I wasn't in a leadership position, but I was like, okay, so what's everyone's goal here? Is it that we're all working towards the same goal, or that we all have our individual goals and we're here to support each other to hit our individual goals? And the team was split: 3 people, team goal; 3 people, individual goals. And that was a big aha moment for our leader. And she was like, I thought we were all on the same page here. That was really good information for me to know. And she pulled me aside afterwards and she was like, I really appreciate that question. I might not have opened it up so that way people could see explicitly who's against who in the room, but it uncovered a lot of information. It's how can we come together as a team? Because we do need to have those shared goals, right? So that's one story or example of just the numbers weren't working, but then there was also that feeling in the meeting of something's not right here. How can you get curious, uncover the problem statement, right? You're an engineer, what's the problem statement? And then we work towards a solution there.
I love that example. It is not necessarily where I thought you might be taking this, and I love it even more because of that. So ironically, Jenna, I worked at an organization for 16 years. It's a consulting firm, and at that firm, my last major title was I essentially led organizational strategy and alignment. The reason that that role existed is exactly what you just talked about. How can I align the agendas of an individual person with the strategy at large? Because if we're not rowing in the same direction, we're fighting our own friction, and then we become bigger competitors to ourselves than our external competitors. So
Bingo.
I love that you brought attention to that. And I just can't help but make the same parallels to the way we do our lives at home. So as an example, I literally just before talking to you recorded a testimonial with one of my clients that just rolled out of my program. So my program, just like my podcast, is called the Life Management System. And she consulted me for a couple of reasons. One, her oldest was starting kindergarten, and she realized, wow, this is a different ballgame. People think it gets easier when they start school, and they very quickly realize, unfortunately, that's not the case. It gets harder. And then the second reason she consulted me is she had a lot on her plate. She's very social. She had a lot of extra caregiving responsibilities that she took on with her extended family. And then the third thing is she didn't have domestic support at home. And her husband was quite unavailable, very busy, that sort of thing. So just in that testimonial, she said to me, I asked the question, what do you believe one of your most salient pieces of results were that you got from participating in the life management system? And she said, my husband and I came into kids like we came into our relationship, assuming that nothing changed. She goes, I underappreciated, and both of us were very blind to how misaligned our core values were as parents, because what I wanted to create and accomplish and the type of culture I wanted to create in our family is very different than what his goals were and what he envisioned for our family. So we were rowing in these opposite directions and we didn't even know it. And that's like a team of 2. So if you think about extrapolating that to the size of an organization, particularly a larger organization, that is 10 times scale the problem of a 4-person family with only 2 decision makers.
Right?
It's wild. It's wild. Okay, so you work with both individuals and organizations. So you bring a lot of skill set to the table here, Jenna, and a lot of thinking. So before I get into your lightning round questions, I would like to wrap this up with just zooming out a little bit and saying, okay, if you were to think about that one tool or that one question that somebody can always go back to if they are feeling stuck or frustrated in a conversation, what might you recommend that they do, think, or say?
How can I help? That is a question that I've learned scares people and yet offers so much value and information that they didn't even know that they could attain. So I recommend asking this question in networking conversations and when you start a new job, when you're at conferences, right? If you can be the person that can help someone else, you're going to make deposits into like your social capital. You're going to better build your network. That's going to contribute to your personal brand. And overall, it's going to, the karma bank, right? Like social capital, but then also it's going to give back. And why people get so worried about asking that question is because they're like, I don't know if I can help. Like, I just met this person. How would I know how to lean in or how could I help? Or they come at it from like an imposter syndrome perspective as to like, what do I know? I'm just an individual contributor. What do I know? I'm just a mom, right? People love to downplay their ability, but you can phrase it such as, hey, I don't exactly know how I can help you today, but like when it comes to the work that you're doing and what I'm doing, is there any way that I could help you? You could broker introductions. You could, maybe you could lend a helping hand personally on the personal front, right? Like asking that question, people, especially in a world where it's always like give to get, like people are going to be taken a little bit off guard and be like, I don't necessarily know, but thank you for asking. I'll get back to you on that. And then you ask them again next time you meet. I think that that is one of the best ways to build a relationship, to again get information about the job that people are doing, what they're dealing with at home, what they're dealing with personally. We all have a lot on our plates. And it also, us as working moms, sometimes we struggle to ask for help. So when someone actually asks us that question, my goodness, how taken aback would we be? So I think that's a great networking question. I think it's a great career question, personal brand building question. How can I help? Hey, I might not know how to help you in this exact moment, but if you could wave a magic wand, how could I help you?
I love that. And it takes us right back to the last topic, because if you think about aligning agendas of different leaders, when you ask that question, it allows you to understand what's important to the other person. So that way, not only are you thinking of opportunities to serve, but it conveniently also provides you the opportunity to connect your agenda to theirs so you can multiply the greater impact, as opposed to treating you both as two separate individuals with two separate goals.
In silos. Yeah, because
Yep.
silos don't help anyone. They don't help you and your partner. They don't help that. Like you might think that sales and engineering have nothing to do with each other. And yet you ask an engineer, hey, how can I help? They'd be like, oh, actually, right? And then vice versa. Same thing. You get an engineer with a salesperson or customer success or product, right? And they're like, I'll get back to you on that. And then they come with like a laundry list of ways that
Yeah.
you could help. So you just never know where that question could lead.
Yeah, well, we didn't talk about this, guys. Jenna is in the tech startup world, so you might be able to tell from some of her answers that she, in addition to being a very effective consultant, and content developer, she also, has a day job where she gets to try on all of these pieces of advice for size and gets to experiment real time.
100%. I always say the work that I do in corporate influences the work that I do at Career Civility, and the work that I do at Career Civility influences the work that I do at corporate. So I'm of the learning mindset. I'm not in a position in my career where I say no, because I just feel like I kind of said this: make the decision, you'll learn from it. I'm just in this like plethora of learning opportunities. I think in this market, that's a position that is going to advance where you're at, of just being curious, saying yes to opportunities, seeing how they influence each other. So while it seems absolutely ludicrous, I do balance working motherhood, corporate, and consulting.
Yeah, I always say the three jobs. Like when somebody asks, what I do for work. I'm like, well, my first job is being an executive in culture. And then my second job is my business, my consulting, my coaching, my speaking, my podcasting. My third job is being a parent to two.
Yeah, so it depends on the hour of the
Yeah.
day. Like we really interchange.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so Jenna, I ask every guest I have the same lightning round questions. So the first one for you is, what's your go-to stress busting activity?
I have a dog. I love my dog, so I'll hang out with her and take her for walks. She goes on like 3 or 4 walks a day. So whether it's me, my husband, but I'm always walking to daycare, taking her for a walk. So getting outside, just like breathing, walking my dog, I feel like is the easiest way to just kind of like hit the mute button for a second.
Yeah, breathe new life back into you. I
Yeah.
get that. What is the last book or podcast that you really geeked out on?
Geeked out on. Well, I'm currently reading should I really tell you? I read a couple books at a time. Oh crap, potty training in 3 days.
No.
I just potty trained. If you really want to know, yeah, I was reading it on the plane. Some guy next to me is like, good luck with that. I'm like, thank you. But I actually really enjoyed it, not for the potty training aspect, but because it was teaching me how to like learn about my kid and how he learns. And I've already done it once, but like to go through it again with a different kid was just like, again, I like learning and education. So me being able to learn about, my son and how he processes things and how he picks up on things, I really geeked out over that.
That's
So
wild. Who would have expected from a potty training book that that's the avenue you take?
I
Um,
know, I know.
okay, so last question. If you could wave a magic wand, what task would you eliminate forever?
Either dishes or grocery shopping.
You know, Jenna, you don't have to grocery shop. Like going back to the delegation where we started, get rid of
You
that.
know,
Let
I
them do it for you.
I agree. And I'm too neurotic to outsource it because I've had to like teach my husband like the brands that I like, the like type of produce that I like. And whenever I do like an Instacart or something, they just don't get it right. So that's on me. I fully realize that.
I guess. Yeah. 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 When they reach kindergarten and life starts to explode even more from a capacity perspective, let's have this conversation again.
When they
We'll
show
chat.
up, when the groceries show up at my doorstep, it is amazing. Like when we're on trips and stuff, I'll do it. I will say though, the benefit of living in the city is like we have a market that has like it's like the best meat counter in the city. Like
Mhm.
they have phenomenal stuff and it's literally a block down the street. So I think
Oh,
if we ever moved out of the city with the ease of it, that will change. But like I go to that market 3 times a week. So it's not that like big, quick, like that big overhaul. It's just like, okay, we need more
yeah.
eggs and milk, and I go and grab it.
I
So
like
that
can't even
I'm
imagine that.
spoiled.
As somebody who lives in the suburbs, that is just a wild concept to me.
So that's when we move to the suburbs, I will take you up on
Yeah. Well,
that.
that's
Yeah.
fair. That's fair. So, one of the things going back to the testimonials, I had another one that I recorded too, and one of my clients that just rolled off, I asked her like, what was something that surprised you? And she said, your customization. And she was, what I did not expect is that you would be so customized to every individual person and what their unique needs are. And you really met me where I was. I'm like, yeah, because your circumstances are different. So just like what's coming up here, Jenna, my circumstances living in the suburbs and what I need, it it takes me 5 minutes to get out of my neighborhood, let alone to a
Yeah, yeah,
store,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is very
yeah.
different than it takes you 5 minutes to get down the elevator and out the door to the
Yeah.
market and probably even have the things in hand.
Yes, exactly.
It's
Which
wild.
every family is also different too. Like, they have different needs and how things work, different schedules. So I think that's really important.
Yep, exactly. And different values. That is
True.
really paramount to what it is that I teach and what it is that I really bring to life in the life management system is what you value matters because what you value is different than what I value. And our decisions and priorities need to be built on that foundation as opposed to a one size fits all. Okay, so Jenna, how do people reach you? Whether that
Yeah.
be for their own individual support because they want to up level how they show up, or whether
Yeah.
that be because they think they have a place for you inside their organization that you might be able to help with.
I would say website for organizational. So you can see my services. You can submit an interest form. So it's www.careercivility.com. And then my Instagram, if you're an individual and interested in up leveling or elevating your your professional communication, it's at Career Civility. I do hot takes. I show a little bit behind the scenes of working mom. I do email tips. And I always try to do, just overall workplace communication tips, templates. That's really what changes, in my opinion, what changes my work from like, this theoretical improving your communication skills to making it very practical is through tips, templates, and scripts that you can copy and paste and make your workday easier.
Perfect. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for joining us. And friends, thank you for tuning in. I will drop all of the Jenna's contact information in the show notes. I will also include 2 free guides that I have if you have not seen them. The first is on how to more productively manage your to-do list. So you actually get to see the difference between that quote unquote Rev Gen, as Jenna called it, a priority to do versus a wish list. I will also drop in the time wasters, the top 10 time wasters. As we talked about earlier, one of those is certainly around overthinking. That's, people automatically think a time waster is, oh, I watch too much TV or social media. Sure, that's probably one of them, but there are also many things that we don't think about, like overthinking. So I will drop those in the show notes as well. But until next time, if nobody's told you lately, you're doing a great job. You've got this, mama. Hey friend, thanks for tuning in. Add the Life Management System podcast to your favorites so you don't miss my practical, snack-sized tips to help you manage the mental load and create a life that works for you. If we're not yet connected on Instagram, come say hi at Working Moms Movement for daily inspiration. And if this is your 3rd or 10th time listening, it's time you bless the small business. Share this episode with another working mom in the thick of it and take 30 seconds to rate and review. It helps more than you know. And if you're ready to go from surviving to thriving and make your day-to-day actually sustainable, email me at Courtney@workingmomsmovement.com. Mention this podcast for 25% off my coaching services. I also speak and host workshops for organizations that want to support working parents from the inside out. Reach out if you think yours is ready. This has been the Life Management System, your shortcut to less chaos and more calm. And here's your reminder to keep managing your life instead of letting it manage you.